Good afternoon. Welcome to the Department of Behavioral Health update for September 16th. A reminder, September is a busy month. We still are in the midst of National Suicide Prevention Month and Recovery Month. A reminder to go to our websites, Fresno Care, and the department website for SUD to learn about all the activities going on this month. All right, very quickly through COVID, we are now approaching 30 million cases worldwide and almost 937,000 deaths. In the United States, we're up to 6.6 million cases and over 196,000 deaths. In California, things have slowed down a little bit. We're at 760,013 cases and 14,451 deaths, and our overall positive rate is down to 4.2% in the state, which is a decline from last week when I reported out at 5.3. And so that's one of the lowest positivity rates we've seen in some time. When you look at Fresno County, we're up to 27,312 cases and 348 deaths. And so a little bit of a slowdown when you look at those graphs. And when we look at hospitalization trends, I have to give you a disclaimer here. It looks a bit lower from last week where we had 133 hospitalized, but the 117 is only 8 out of the 9 hospitals reporting. So I don't have a good handle on how much that 9th hospital would contribute, but hopefully next week we will get a little better information. All right, in terms of reopening and the watch list, we are improving. The update came out yesterday, and if you'll recall last week, we talked about how we were experiencing almost 127 cases per day. We're now at 75 cases per day. We need to get below 70 to exit the purple tier. We also have to be under 8% testing positivity, and we are there. We are at 6.2% testing positivity. And so those are both really positive trends. We are cautiously optimistic given that we just got through the Labor Day weekend, and historically in the last few months when we had Memorial Day and then we had July 4th, both of those holiday weekends resulted in significant spikes in cases and hospitalization. So hopefully everyone behaved and we don't ruin this good progress we've made so that we can move forward in the reopening. I know many people are anxious. I know I am. I'd love to see us have a safe reopening where we practice our mask wearing and spatial distancing, but get to do a little more that we haven't been able to do for a while. So don't just cross your fingers, actually follow the rules. All right. Creek fire, as if one disaster isn't enough. Again, we have 2 going on right now. So on the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see the creek fire as I reported it last week. The right hand is as of this morning. So while the overall fire has obviously grown, the growth has slowed down significantly, and the hot spots are not quite as prominent in those areas where there's still structures at risk. There have been close to 500 structures lost in the creek fire, and significant impacts to particularly our foothill communities of Pine Ridge and just below Cressman's, as well as some cabins and such at Huntington Lake. I know my kids, my stepchildren go to Sierra Unified, to Sierra High School, and the principal at Sierra has lost his home. His wife is a teacher at Pine Ridge. So we're really working hard to provide supports to individuals who've been impacted by the fire. As I reported out last week, we have a really dedicated team of clinicians who's manning our temporary evacuation point at Granite Ridge Intermediate School. We will be opening a local assistance center that will have a longer-term presence with more entities to provide supports to individuals who have long-term impacts, not just evacuated individuals, but people whose homes were lost or damaged. And so it's still looking like mid-October before this fire gets fully contained, but the rebuilding will take a bit longer. And so the next slide will show you the evacuations. Remember, the red is evacuated areas, the yellow are evacuation warnings. And so slowly but surely that red is turning into yellow or green. Where it's green, that means there aren't even a warning there anymore. So that's as people begin to repopulate areas that were not impacted by the fire. You can see on both maps a little red line outline. That's actually the areas directly impacted by the fire. So there's still a lot of people evacuated who are in an area that hasn't been directly impacted by the fire, but they'll have potentially issues with returning if they had their electricity off and such. So lots of activities going on around what's called repopulation, and that can be everything from assisting people who have spoiled food or have to return their animals to properties to helping individuals navigate what will you do with a property that's been lost, and will there be rebuilding going on and that type of thing. So we are beginning those repopulation efforts, opening the local assistance center, as I said, and providing some disaster supports. So I did want to talk briefly about disaster fatigue. Lots of disasters going on. Locally, obviously impacted by COVID and the Creek Fire, but we've had a number of hurricanes. There's one going on right now with some significant flooding in the southeast. And it is easy to start to feel overwhelmed, even when you're resilient, to begin to feel your own resources ebbing, and particularly when we're inundated with news about these disasters. So I thought I would just briefly go over the phases of a disaster to talk about how people deal with it. If there's a warning, or even if we think about the Creek Fire, where we knew there was a fire and then eventually the evacuation started. I would say we're kind of in the heroic honeymoon stage right now with the Creek Fire, where lots of activities going on, tremendous outpouring of support from the community with donations and time and offers to house animals and such. I'm housing 3 dogs and a cat at my house who've been evacuated from the fire. But it's very normal as we go through this that as that honeymoon period begins to fade and the reality of the losses set in, individuals who've been impacted can become disillusioned. And it can take a lot of time, really, with lots of ups and downs until that new beginning, that reconstruction of the life. And we're all kind of experiencing that with COVID as well. We talked about going through the grief cycle several weeks ago. But this same disaster is going on. In the beginning, lots of enthusiasm around we can do this, we're going to stay at home, we're going to follow the rules. And then a lot of disillusionment as things carried on, and especially as new information came in and guidance was given, and then we had setbacks and such. We're still ongoing in the COVID disaster. So this concept of disaster fatigue is one that our department is really trying to provide resources for. And so we have a section of our webpage now that shows that behavioral health disaster fatigue, and has resources including a 24/7 disaster stress hotline that the resources on there for. And we're doing a lot of advertising and sharing of that information on social media to make those resources available. We'll also be leading an effort as a work group of our larger Emergency Operations Center to really provide supports to our frontline workers who are dealing with the Creek Fire in particular, and individuals who've been directly impacted by it. So we'll continue to push out resources and advise people about tips and things that you can do to cope with the disaster as it's ongoing. And you can find those on this website. So in terms of what you can do, this is pretty much the same as last week, but I really want to emphasize that continue to be proud of our teams. I have been so incredibly impressed, really county-wide, and also certainly with our behavioral health team. People have really rallied around and provided supports directly and indirectly, both through COVID and right now through the Creek Fire. Remember self-care. We have terrible air going on right now. And really, we need to wear our masks and stay inside as much as possible until that air clears up. Support one another and take care of yourself. Self-care is so incredibly important right now. We can't emphasize it enough. I will advise again, stay away from the news and the news cycles and social media, especially if you find that it's stressing your ability to cope. Take breaks and make that work-life balance work, particularly for those of you who are teleworking. And don't forget to wear your mask and physically distance, and really, really don't come to work sick. I'm going to see if there's any questions. I don't think we have any questions yet. I will give it just a second. I will say that we're going to have, I think, next week an all-staff meeting, and that will be in lieu of our COVID and Creek Fire update. I may touch on it a little bit, but we also are going to have some information there that we'll share around microaggressions and some strategies for dealing with that, and really addressing some of our racial injustice work that is ongoing and needs to grow in our department and across our community. And we'll have some updates on some other things as well. And we're also hoping in the next few weeks to have some, we'll call it an alternative to our typical annual picnic. And then the final thing I really want to emphasize to all of you, I can't emphasize enough, is get your flu vaccine. Getting your flu vaccine this year really could be a life or death thing. We don't know at this point what the interplay would be if you were to get the flu and COVID at the same time. And so flu is something you can vaccinate yourself against. It's not 100%, but every little bit of protection helps. And if you think about it, if you put the seatbelt on in your car, it won't necessarily protect you from all things that could happen in a car accident. But if you put on your seatbelt and you use your blinkers and you drive the speed limit, those all start layering on protections that collectively protect you more than any one of those activities would do. And it's the same thing with COVID. Will this mask protect me from everything? No, it will not. But if I keep my distance, I wear my mask when I'm around other people or in inside situations, if I get my flu vaccine, I'm really protecting myself and the people around me. And so I strongly encourage you and your families to get your flu vaccine unless you have some health or other reason not to. I know I got mine yesterday. I was picking up a prescription at the pharmacy and they said, have you had your flu vaccine yet? We can give it to you. And they gave it to me free. I even got a $5 Target gift card. So most of the pharmacies that you go to, and they're in grocery stores and Target and places like that, will give you your flu vaccine. And sometimes you get a gift card when you do that, and it doesn't cost anything. The county will also be having some drive-through clinics, and our department, we're working on hopefully having some sort of drive-through clinic that you could come to as well as your family. Not sure if we're going to be able to pull it off, but we're working on it really hard. So get your flu vaccine.
We put a list of public health locations on our homepage, DBH homepage.
Okay, on our DBH homepage, my handy assistant, Brian, is informing me that we did put the locations of the county's flu clinics, flu vaccine clinics on there so that you can learn more about when those will be offered. I think there's one tomorrow even, Brian.
I believe so.
And so please go on the website and find out when those flu vaccine clinics are occurring. You can also go on the public health website and it'll have that information. So please, please, please get your flu vaccine. We don't have any questions. I'm going to give it one more second, and if I don't get any more questions, I would just let you all know that I want you to have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week.